So, Allie, these congresswomen sharing their stories, this is all a part of trying to change policy.
It's part of trying to change policy. The question that I asked them when we spoke exclusively before their testimony was if they thought it would matter. And I was struck Congressman Cori Bush pointed to the fact that having come up in the church, been a member of her faith community, she even saw her own mind changed as she heard more stories and made these decisions herself. She said absolutely she thinks that this can change minds. Of course, the reality on the ground, you and I have covered this issue for a long time. We know how deeply passionate and deeply entrenched these viewpoints are. We even saw that tension point during the hearing, these two very stark contrasts between the lawmakers who shared their stories to have abortions and a Republican lawmaker on the committee who testified for the committee who said, pointing to her mother's decision not to have an abortion. These are deeply held views. I do think, though, in the broader conversation around this issue, we're now seeing the impact of reflective democracy, having more women of color and women, period, in the halls of Congress. This is what you get. And actually, I asked one of these lawmakers about this. Listen to what she told me. Is that an outgrowth of reflective democracy?
I totally think so. Being able to see what a difference Barbara's story, Cori's story, and my story can make is really important, and it doesn't happen if you don't have that representation of women and of women of color.
And I think what she said there is so important, Geoff, because we spoke with these three women who happen to be women of color. And the thing that they continued to hearken back to, especially Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who had her abortion before that landmark Roe ruling, she pointed to the fact that she survived. She was lucky enough, in her words, to have a family friend who knew a good doctor in Mexico. Even though it was a back alley clinic, she continuously said it was a good doctor. She pointed to the fact that she survived, but how dangerous it was for so many, especially black and brown women. And that's the warning that you hear still from reproductive advocates, is people who say if you go back to a time before Roe, should the Supreme Court crumble those protections, those are the women who would be in the crosshairs here.
So where does this policy push head next? We know the Supreme Court is expected to hear the Mississippi case that bans abortion after 15 weeks. The Supreme Court's expected to take that up in December. And there is a push, as you mentioned, on Capitol Hill. So what happens next?
Well, and we saw the House last week pass a bill that would have codified federal protections. At the same time, though, that bill has no real reality in the Senate. You would have to reform the filibuster there. It's actually notable in the aftermath of the House passing that bill, we saw groups like NARAL join the push of coalitions pushing the Senate to reform the filibuster because they feel it's that important to codify these protections at the federal level. In terms of other legislation, though, that's sort of where it starts and ends. There's the momentum on the Democratic side for it, but no real reality behind it. And I think that's why these lawmakers shared their story. There was such apprehension behind sharing these stories. Many of them don't talk about this often. At the same time, though, they did it because they want to try to move the public and the national conversation around this issue at a time when they see things as very dangerous for people who believe in the right to choose.
Allie Vitale, thank you so much for bringing that reporting to us. Really appreciate it. And with us now is one of the congresswomen that Allie mentioned who testified today at that hearing. We have with us Barbara Lee of California. Congresswoman, thanks for spending some time with us this afternoon. And you shared your story for the first time into the public record. That was uncharted territory for you. Why was it important for you to testify about your personal experience?
Thank you so much. And let me just say, having an abortion is my personal business. It's nobody else's business. It's a private decision that I made with my mother and my family. And so I've been very reluctant to talk about that because of just that. What is taking place now in the country compelled me to come forward and talk about those days that I remember so well, having a back alley abortion, and I survived. But you know what? We're getting back there if we don't do something and do something quickly. And so as hard as it was, and it's really hard to talk about these grueling decisions that I had to make at age 16. I just turned 16. But if my story will help other women come out, and if it'll shed some light on the fact that regardless of your views, you know, people have the decision-making right, the freedom to make their own decisions about their bodies, and that's what we were trying to communicate. And I felt like now is the time, if I was ever going to be helpful in making sure that no one has to go through what I went through years ago.
Do you feel like you were heard today? I mean, what do you hope your colleagues who may support restrictions, who may support abortion restrictions, what do you hope they took away today after today's hearing?
Well, I hope they took away that whether they support or oppose abortion, that it's their decision. I'm not going to tell my colleagues that their mothers made the wrong decisions. I'm not going to tell my colleagues that they made the wrong decisions. That's not for politicians to determine. It's for that person. It's for whomever she trusts. And those decisions are very personal and should not be part of elected officials' decisions. I want everyone to have the right, the freedom to make their own decisions. So I hope they heard us, that it doesn't matter to me what you believe in. I'm not going to interfere with your beliefs. Just let me do my thing. Let me do what I have to do if, in fact, that's my decision. And believe you me, these are some gut-wrenching and heart-wrenching decisions that we have to make, and it's very traumatic.
You represent California, but you were born in Texas, which now has a near total abortion ban. If other states follow Texas's lead, and other states, some of them are trying to do that, how can Congress protect Roe v. Wade?
Well, I'm really proud of the fact that we've been working since 2013 with Congresswoman Judy Chu to pass the Women's Health Protection Act. We passed that. Of course, we know it's an uphill battle given the dynamics in the Senate, but this is a first step to make sure that we put into law Roe versus Wade. And so we can't stop now. We've got to keep going because, once again, I can see what's getting ready to take place. Back alley abortions. Do you know that the African-American women died more of septic abortions than any other reasons for death in the day when I was a teenager? And so I see what's going on. This is an issue of justice. It's an issue of freedom. And we have to make sure that everyone has access to the full range of reproductive health care, including abortion. And so we've got to educate more members of Congress and make sure they understand I'm not taking away their freedom. I'm not condemning them for their views, but let me make my own personal decisions. It's none of your business. It's not the business of any elected officials.
When you say, I see what's coming, you have the Supreme Court scheduled to consider the constitutionality of Mississippi's so-called heartbeat bill that's scheduled to happen in December. How concerned are you about what may come down the line?
Well, I'm very concerned, and that's why we must try to fight at the state level to try to stop these laws, because you showed the map how many states now, unfortunately, have abortion restrictions or are moving toward that. And so we have to have, and we have some wonderful organizations at the local level who have to hold their officials accountable, who have to continue to file appeals and lawsuits, which we're doing, and really make sure that we get Roe versus Wade codified into law, make sure that's the law of the land. And also we need to make sure that the Hyde Amendment, which I talked about today, is repealed. Because I was here as a staff person to our beloved Congressman Ron Dellums, and that Hyde Amendment, and when Henry Hyde put that amendment forward in the mid-'70s, he said he wished he could do it for every woman, but at least he would do it for poor women and get it in Medicaid, so poor women wouldn't have access to the full range of reproductive health care. It's so racist, it's so discriminatory, so we've got to stop this right now.
Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California, I appreciate your time and your willingness to speak with me this afternoon. Thank you.
Nice being with you. Thank you.
Meantime, here's a story about